Hi everyone, I'm your host Peter Zablocki, and you're listening to History Shorts. I hope everyone's having a great day so far, and thank you so much for making this show a small part of that. If you'd like to help me out with a small gesture, please leave History Shorts a rating or a review, and click that subscribe button if you haven't already done so. For sources and books used as the basis for these episodes, how to advertise on the show, and other information, such as a list of our upcoming guests on the Conversation series, or a link to our Patreon account where you can listen to exclusive episodes not heard here, please visit www.historyshortspodcast.com. You could always shoot me an email at peter@historyshortspodcast.com as well. Today's episode is brought to you by the Podcast Republic, your ultimate podcast listening app. Discover and subscribe to thousands of podcasts from around the globe, all in one place. Download Podcast Republic now and take your podcast experience to the next level. Having said all of that, in the shadowed scriptoriums of medieval Europe, where candlelight flickered across parchment and the ink-stained hands of monks labored in silence, few works inspired more awe or dread than the Codex Gigas. Towering nearly 3 feet tall and weighing over 160 pounds, this monstrous tome is the largest surviving medieval manuscript in the world. But its size is not what earned its dark nickname. Bound in wood and leather, inked in iron gall, and written in the dead silence of monastery discipline, the Codex Gigas has been known for centuries as the Devil's Bible, not merely because it contains a chilling full-page portrait of Satan, but because of the legend that surrounds its creation. Well, here is the rest of that story.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
To hold the Codex is to hold an enigma. Created in the early 13th century in the Benedictine monastery of what is now the Czech Republic, it is an impossible volume. 310 parchment leaves, most made of calfskin or donkey hide, meticulously inscribed in Latin in a single, consistent hand. Within its pages lies the entirety of the Vulgate Bible, along with historical texts by Josephus and Isidore of Seville, magical formulas, exorcisms, medical treatises, calendars, and various instructions, including recipes. It is in essence a medieval library contained in one impossibly vast book. But what truly sets it apart, and what whispers gave it life through rumors, is what appears on page 290. There, in unsettling detail, sits the devil. Not as a fallen angel or a clever serpent, but as a monster beast, squatting between two towers, occupying an entire page. He has clawed hands, green talons, blood-red eyes, and a tongue lolling from his mouth. His horns twist upward, and he stares from the page with a gaze that seems almost to breathe, hungry and still. Facing this terrifying image, across from it on the opposite page, is a depiction of the heavenly city, a stark contrast of salvation and damnation in visual form. No other known Bible from the Middle Ages dares to portray the devil so boldly and so theatrically, and no other manuscript bears a legend quite like this one. The story begins, as most legends do, with sin. According to 17th century telling, a monk at the monastery in what is now the Czech Republic broke his sacred vows, perhaps through pride, lust, or heresy. As punishment, he was sentenced to the most extreme of monastery penalties, to be walled up alive. But the monk, desperate to avoid such a fate, made a pact. He swore to create in a single night a book that would glorify the monastery and atone for his sins, a compendium of all human knowledge, sacred and profane. The abbot, perhaps amused or skeptical, agreed. The monk labored deep into the night, the story goes. He wrote and wrote, copying scripture, histories, and prayers, but as midnight approached, he saw that his task was impossible. The sheer scale of what he had pledged was too much for one man. Facing his doom, he turned not to God, but to Lucifer. With trembling hand, he offered a pact, another one, his soul in exchange for the manuscript's completion. The devil accepted. In a flash, the book was finished, written in a single hand, its ink unblotted, its letters perfect. As a token, or perhaps as a signature, the devil placed his own portrait within the pages. The monk lived, but his soul was lost. The Codex Gigas was born. Historians, of course, dismiss the tale as folklore, but even the facts struggle to dispel the manuscript's aura. The book was indeed written by a single scribe, evident from the uniform calligraphy throughout all 310 folios. Scholars have analyzed the pen strokes, spacing, and ink to confirm this, but the time it would have taken is staggering. Modern estimates suggest 25 to 30 years of constant work would have been needed to produce such a manuscript. The handwriting shows remarkable consistency, as if done without significant aging or fatigue, leading some to speculate that the scribe worked under extraordinary circumstances. The identity of the monk remains uncertain, though tradition names him Herman the Recluse. How did this solitary monk gain access to such a wide range of texts, however? The book includes not only the full Bible, but as I mentioned, ancient histories, medical knowledge, legal codes, and even spells. Rare material for a single monastery to have in their own library. Some believe that the monastery may have had help from royal patrons or neighboring abbeys. Others suspect the work was moved and added to over time, though the uniform script challenges that theory. The fate of the monastery where it was written only deepens the mystery, for it was small and poor. The Codex, a treasure beyond its means, may have been its undoing. In the 15th century, the book passed into the hands of Cistercians in Sedlec, then later to the Benedictine monastery in Brevnov. Eventually it entered the Imperial Library of Prague, collected by the Holy Roman Emperor Rudolf II, a man famously obsessed with the occult, alchemy, and forbidden knowledge. Emperor Rudolf II kept the codex among his collection, nestled beside instruments of astronomy, in a castle said to be haunted. In 1648, during the final days of the 30 Years' War, Swedish troops stormed Prague and looted its treasures. Among the spoils was the Codex Gigas, which was then taken back to Stockholm as a trophy of war. There it remains today, preserved in the Royal Library, watched by archivists and scholars, and those who come just to gaze upon the devil's portrait. Despite its age, the Codex has remained eerily well preserved. But its condition is not without mystery. At some point, 10 full pages were cut out of it, cleanly, deliberately, and very long ago. What did they contain? No one really knows. Some speculate they held further devil-esque content. Others believe they included monastery confession, or even the record of the pact itself. No definite explanation has emerged. The missing leaves are a void into which speculation rushes, only amplifying the book's sinister reputation. The text itself is as curious as the legend. Its fusion of the sacred and the supernatural suggests that the Codex was intended from the start as more than just a Bible. It was a spiritual and practical handbook, a guide for a totality of life. Heaven and hell coexisted in its pages, just as they did in a worldview of medieval Europe. And yet it is the image of the devil that lingers in the mind, that gives the book its shiver. Unlike the medieval Satan of moral allegory, this devil is raw and bestial. He is not tempting, but triumphant, not subtle, but dominant in the entire book. His full-page inclusion, without accompanying narrative, is unique in medieval Christian art. Some suggest that it was intended as a warning, a visual gatekeeper against pride. Others see it as a dare, a marker of rebellion by a monk who had seen too much of hypocrisy and suffering to cling to orthodox faith. Anyway, the Codex Gigas has inspired centuries of rumor and fascination. In the 18th century, superstitious whispers said the book brought misfortune. People claim that those who stared too long into the devil's eyes would go mad at some point in their life. Some said that the book groaned when opened, or that it resisted being copied. In Nazi Germany, Heinrich Himmler is said to have tried to acquire it for his private library, believing it held some secrets of ancient power. Kind of like Raiders of the Lost Ark. Fortunately, the Swedish librarians refused. Today, scholars continue to study the Codex, not for its satanic lore, but for what it tells us about medieval knowledge, about the way that monks synthesized the sacred and the practical, the divine and the demonic. It is in many ways a snapshot of 13th century intellectual life, encyclopedic, contradictory, and profoundly human. Yet for all of its academic value, the Codex Gigas remains, at heart, a mystery. It is the product of solitude and silence. It was made by a man whose name, if he ever signed it, has been lost forever. It bears a face that countless eyes have feared, painted on parchment likely made from the hides of over 100 animals. It has passed through fire and war across centuries and empires. It was born in a monastery, stolen in conquest, and now rests behind glass, as silent and massive as a tomb. Thanks for listening.